Along coastal Norway, launching a boat could mean fishing supper, reaching an assembly, carrying livestock, or crossing water that replaced any road. Exceptional seafaring grew from repeated necessity, not from an inherited maritime instinct unique to one people. Mountains divided districts while fjords penetrated deep inland, making boats practical tools for communication across much of the western landscape. The outer coast added thousands of islands, skerries, channels, and sheltered anchorages where local knowledge mattered as much as hull design. Competence accumulated through ordinary voyages performed in changing weather, often before anyone considered crossing the North Sea. This environment did not make every coastal inhabitant a sailor because households divided labor by skill, status, age, and opportunity. It did, however, reward communities that preserved boat-building knowledge, trained crews, and maintained dependable landing places. The boat itself became a moving workshop where timber selection, ironwork, rope, balance, rowing, and judgment had to cooperate. Norway's long shoreline contains many regional seas, from the Skagerrak approaches to western fjords and the colder routes northward. Modern national boundaries obscure how local communities faced different fisheries, sailing seasons, political centers, and neighboring coasts. Some fertile districts supported powerful farms, while narrower settlements combined cultivation with marine resources and seasonal movement. Archaeological remains of cod, herring, shellfish, and marine mammals reveal exploitation patterns that varied greatly by place and period. Fishing demanded more than bravery, since crews had to predict grounds, preserve catches, repair gear, and return through familiar hazards. Repeated short passages taught the behavior of tides, wind shadows, reflected waves, and sudden changes around headlands. Such learning was practical and social, carried through demonstration and shared work rather than surviving navigational manuals. No 8th century Norwegian handbook explains how pilots read the coast, so reconstructions must remain grounded in routes, vessels, and later practice. Landmarks could guide coastal travel, while open crossings required broader estimates of direction, speed, weather, and elapsed time. The sun and stars were available when skies allowed, but popular claims about specialized Viking instruments often exceed secure contemporary evidence. Successful navigation probably combined celestial cues with swell patterns, birds, cloud formations, soundings, experience, and cautious waiting. Waiting was a skill because a delayed departure could preserve a crew, cargo, and boat that reckless timing would endanger. Coastal communities also needed vessels suited to tasks smaller than warfare. Ferries moved people across fjords, fishing craft worked local waters, and cargo boats carried provisions between scattered farms. Each journey provided opportunities to notice strain, leakage, ore performance, loading limits, and the handling of a hull near shore. Repair knowledge mattered especially where a damaged plank or worn rope could strand travelers far from a workshop. Clinker construction joined overlapping planks into a light, flexible shell capable of working with rough water. Builders shaped planks according to the timber rather than assembling standardized boards from modern plans. Oak was prized for major components where available, while pine and other woods served according to region, vessel, and purpose. Iron rivets demanded mining, smelting, smithing, and distribution networks reaching beyond the person who fitted them. Rope could be made from plant fibers, roots, bast, or animal materials, with choices reflecting availability and required strength. Sailcloth represented an enormous investment in fiber preparation, spinning, weaving, and finishing, much of it household labor. That hidden production turned maritime range into a collective achievement rather than the triumph of visible helmsmen alone. Experimental ships show how reconstructed hulls may perform, but they test possibilities instead of reproducing every historical voyage. Norwegian boat finds reveal technological development without forming a simple ladder toward the longship. The Kvalsund vessels, discovered in western Norway, date to around the 7th century and demonstrate sophisticated rowing craft before the Viking Age. Their construction reflects mature clinker traditions, yet neither vessel carried the full combination seen in later sailing ships. Kvalsund therefore captures a technological stage shaped by coastal use rather than an unfinished version of a predetermined warship. By the 9th century, the Oseberg ship displayed elegant construction, rowing positions, and sailing capacity within an extraordinary burial. Its lavish funeral context warns against treating it as an average working vessel or a universal model of ocean performance. The Gokstad ship, also found in a burial, had a stronger seagoing form and space for rowing alongside a substantial sail. Dendrochronology dates its timbers to the late 9th century, after Norwegian seafarers had already crossed distant waters. Together, these ships show specialization. Builders adjusted proportions and strength for different demands rather than producing one standard Viking craft. The surviving examples are exceptional partly because burial protected them, while countless ordinary boats disappeared through decay and reuse. Their tools and joints nevertheless preserve decisions made by craftspeople trained within a broad coastal tradition. Hull quality alone could not overcome poor loading, divided command, exhausted rowers, or ignorance of the destination. True organization converted a capable vessel into reliable transport. Rowing required timing and endurance, especially when wind failed or narrow channels made sails impractical. Sailing demanded coordinated handling of a large square sail, sheets, steering, ballast, and rapid changes near exposed land. The side-mounted steering oar needed an experienced hand because course corrections interacted with waves, sail pressure, and hull movement. Food and fresh water occupied precious space, forcing choices between endurance, cargo, livestock, weapons, and additional people. Wool clothing and layered garments offered protection, but prolonged wet and cold still reduced performance and threatened health. A North Sea crossing was not simply a longer fishing trip, although generations of shorter journeys supplied its essential habits. Norwegian geography also created stepping stones that made some westward movements less abrupt than maps suggest. From southwestern districts, sailors could reach the Northern Isles, then continue toward mainland Britain, Ireland, or the North Atlantic. Orkney and Shetland became major Norse settlement zones, but the chronology and character of initial contacts remain partly unresolved. Place names and later texts document deep Norse influence, while archaeology establishes settlement without narrating every arrival. The sailing corridor rewarded knowledge shared between crews, including anchorages, freshwater sources, currents, and political conditions ashore. Information returned with merchants, raiders, migrants, captives, and envoys, gradually reducing uncertainty along traveled routes. That accumulated route knowledge could circulate among rival leaders, so no kingdom held a permanent monopoly on seafaring skill. Political centers did shape opportunity by gathering ships, provisions, pilots, and followers. Avaldsnes stood beside the Kvalsund Strait, a protected passage along the southwestern Norwegian sailing route. Its location allowed powerful households to influence traffic moving between coastal districts and across the North Sea. Archaeology reveals long-lived elite activity there, though the precise reach of early rulers remains debated. Control of narrow waters could provide tolls, information, hospitality obligations, and leverage over crews seeking safe passage. Farther east, Kaupang developed around the beginning of the 9th century near the Oslo Fjord region. Its workshops, imported goods, and graves connected southern Norway with commercial systems spanning the North Sea and Baltic. Kaupang was not evidence that every traveler became a merchant, but it offered supplies and contacts supporting many forms of mobility. Markets also introduced foreign weights, objects, and expectations, training participants to operate beyond strictly local relationships. The same vessels might carry trade goods during one voyage and armed crews during another, depending on design and circumstance. Calling every departure a Viking expedition erases the coastal economy that maintained maritime competence between famous attacks. Norwegian political fragmentation could encourage mobility when ambitious leaders sought wealth beyond crowded local contests. Later, sagas dramatize exile and royal conflict, but their narratives were written centuries after many events they describe. Contemporary foreign chronicles record attacks and settlements more securely than they explain the Norwegian origins of particular crews. Labels such as Norsemen or Northmen often remained broad, preventing confident assignment of every raid to a modern country. The strongest explanation, therefore, rests not on heroic biography, but on converging geography, technology, labor, and route evidence. Coastal upbringing increased exposure to boats, yet access remained unequal because vessels and equipment required substantial resources. Skilled shipwrights possessed valuable expertise, while wealthy patrons could command timber, iron, sailcloth, food, and crews. Dependent workers helped create maritime power without necessarily sharing its profits or freedom of movement. Women's textile production was especially important to sailing, although assigning every stage to one gender across all communities would oversimplify practice. Enslaved people also labored within Scandinavian households, but archaeology rarely identifies their specific contributions to an individual ship. Exceptional seafaring was thus produced through social organization, as well as environmental challenge. Norway's coast supplied neither effortless wealth nor permanent isolation. Poor harvests could increase reliance on marine foods, while abundant fisheries generated products worth carrying to exchange points. Northern stockfish exports grew prominent later, so their medieval scale cannot simply define the early Viking period. Even so, preserved fish offered one-way coastal production could support travel and regional trade. Boats connected seasonal resources, allowing households to combine fields, upland grazing, fishing grounds, and distant markets. That mixed economy made movement routine before expansion made it famous. When opportunity opened overseas, existing skills could be redirected toward raiding, settlement, trade, service, or exploration. Success still depended upon destination politics, resistance, alliances, and chance, not Scandinavian seamanship alone. Irish, English, Frankish, Baltic, and North Atlantic communities possessed their own maritime knowledge and adapted actively to newcomers. Norwegian sailors learned within those encounters, adopting information and opportunities unavailable along their home fjords. The process was cumulative. Each verified route made the next voyage easier to plan, provision, and explain to potential participants. Ship burials later turned vessels into elite statements, preserving spectacular examples while ordinary working craft vanished from the record. That survival pattern can distort the story toward chieftains, ornament, and warfare. Kvalsund redirects attention to earlier rowing craft shaped by regional waters and practical demands. Oseberg demonstrates prestigious craftsmanship, whereas Gokstad reveals a robust seagoing design from a mature maritime society. No single hull explains coastal Norway's reputation, because boats worked only through communities that continually built and used them. Seafarers became exceptional through countless necessary passages whose names never entered chronicles. Their greatest advantage was not fearlessness, It was familiarity with preparation, delay, repair, cooperation, and changing water. From fjord landings to Atlantic islands, the route lengthened because practical knowledge traveled home and entered the next crew's calculations. Coastal Norway produced outstanding seafarers by making maritime competence an everyday infrastructure long before it became an overseas reputation.